In your notes, you want to put a percent sign and then a percent sign that's been crossed out. We're going to go back and forth between converting from percents to decimals and decimals to percents. So if you're looking at something and it does not have a percent sign, and you want it to have a percent sign, you're going to multiply by 100. If what you're looking at has a percent sign and you want to get rid of it, you're going to divide by 100. To try to put that into your memory, just like maybe consider like a percent sign if you use your imagination. See how it's kind of like 2 zeros there in the percent? If you wanted to get rid of 2 zeros, you divide by 100. Like 500 divided by 100 is 5. If you wanted to get 2 zeros, you would multiply by 100. So when you have the percent, if you want a percent, you want the percent, so multiply by 100. If you want to get rid of a percent, you're going to divide by 100. So here's just a couple examples, 25%, 70%, and 7%. God bless you. And so if you have 25%, notice I have a percent sign and I want to get rid of it. So I'm going to divide by 100. And you can grab your calculator and just go 25 divided by 100. We've learned that when you divide by 100, it really just moves the decimal point left 2 spots. So if I really emphasize the location of the decimal point on a whole number like 25, then what I could do is just take this decimal point and move it backwards 2 spots, and that's dividing by 100. But if you pick up your calculator and go 25 divided by 100, you're going to get 0.25, or you know that dividing by 100 moves the decimal left 2 spots. Okay, so another couple examples here. If I have 70%, I want to get rid of a percent sign, so I'm going to divide by 100. If you do that by hand, we want to emphasize the location of the decimal point. Okay, so that's right there. And I'm going to move it left 2 to divide by 100, and that's going to make this 0.70. Now, if you have 0.70, that's correct, but this extra 0 on the end, I don't need it. So I'm going to just drop that off, and it's 0.7. Okay, last example of this type, 7%. I have a percent sign. I want to get rid of it, so I'm going to divide by 100. Let's emphasize the location of the decimal point. On 7, it's at the end. So when I divide the 7 by 100, it's going to move back 2 spots. But to hold that decimal point there, when I move it back 2 places, I'm going to need an extra 0 in there. Okay, so when it was 0.70, I could leave the 0 off, but 0.07, I'm going to need, when it was point blank 7, I needed that extra 0 in there. Okay, so far a big picture is I have a percent, I want to get rid of it, so divide by 100. If I go back the other direction, I'm starting off with numbers that do not have percent signs. So if I want a percent, you multiply by 100. So I could take 0.25 times 100 and let my calculator do the work for me, or when I multiply by 100, the decimal point, let's emphasize where that's at right now, it would move to the right 2 places. 0.25 times 100. So moving that decimal point right 2 places, I get just 25, but now it's a percent, so I need to make sure that I put the percent sign on it. Okay, here's another one, 0.3. It does not have a percent sign, so I want a percent. So we're going to multiply 0.3 by 100. Let's emphasize the location of the decimal point right now. When you multiply by 100, it moves the decimal right 2 places. Okay, so moving that decimal point right 2 places, I have a space. So I need to put in a 0 there to hold that decimal at the end. And this is now a percent. Okay, last example, 0.04. There's no percent sign. So if you want a percent, you're going to multiply by 100. So emphasizing the location of the current decimal point. If we multiply by 100, it moves the decimal right 2 places. So if I move this decimal point right 2 places, I have 0.4 decimal point. Now the 0 in the front is not necessary. I don't know if you guys have ever had a remote control for your TV where for channel 4 you can't just press 4. I had a TV where you had to press 0.4 enter to get it to put in channel 4. Okay, so 0.4 is the same thing as 4, but we don't really need that 0 there. So I'm gonna put my percentage and then I'm gonna drop off that 0, so 4%. Okay, so one more time so far. If you want a percent and you don't have one, you multiply by 100. If you want to get rid of a percent, you're going to divide by 100. So here's just a couple extra examples. Topic 51, it just mixes the two of them together. So I have 9.1%, and in this one, I want to turn it into a decimal. Now that can sometimes be misleading. You hear that and you're like, but there's already a decimal there. When they say turn it into a decimal, they really mean get rid of the percent sign. So if I want to get rid of a percent sign, I'm going to divide by 100. So taking 9.1 divided by 100, that's going to move this decimal point left 2 spots. Okay, so there's my decimal point. I'm moving it left 2 places. But when I move it left 2 places, I have a space there. So I need to put a 0 in there. So I'm going to put a 0 right there. And so 9.1% is 0.091. Okay, then they gave us the number 0.216, 216 thousandths. So if I have 216 thousandths, and sorry, it's coming in a little funky, but if I have 216 thousandths, I do not have a percent sign. So if I want a percent sign, we're going to multiply by 100. So I just go 0.216 times 100, which moves this decimal point right 2 spots, and I'll have 21.6. I don't need this extra 0 in the front, and it's a percent, so I'm going to drop that off. And we have our final answer. Okay, so for all 3 of those topics, 49, 50, and 51, if what's in front of you does not have a percent sign, multiply by 100. If it has a percent sign and you want to get rid of it, divide by 100.